Hello, YouTube, and welcome back to Bracket Breakdown. I am Nick North, a big boy with big feelings, and I am so happy that you all came back for us to shift into the third part of this biggest Power Rangers Super Sentai tournament ever. I am very excited that people are coming back still after the first two parts because I know it is a long process, but I think it'll also be very rewarding. So I'm excited to just hop into the third part. As the third part of the series, I'm also kind of trying to reference Turbo a little bit. And fun fact, I'm not like a big car guy, so I don't have a ton of that kind of thing. But what I do have is this scarf that I'm wearing like an old-timey speed racer person, and this glove that reminds me of racing modern day. So it's giving conceptual, it's giving race across time, it's giving I didn't want to buy anything new, but I still look great, and that's the important part. Alrighty, let's get right into it with match 201. We have Hades Beast Ghoul versus Bara Printer. And fun fact for the first fight, I have a very big love for hyenas. They're so goofy and also like threatening. Eventually, I plan on gracing my arm, the part that's actually covered, with a hyena, but our little group of Girl Scouts will need more members before that can happen. Anyway, that's one of the many reasons I enjoy Hades Beast Ghoul, but also all of like the hair and the bones are very gnarly, which is exactly appropriate for hyenas. Bara Printer, our lovely loser, is based on a crab, and I think he would have had a better chance if he delivered more on that, but like either the body shape or the detailing just isn't really working for me, so Ghoul is going to be the winner. For match 202, we have Kendo Mask versus Zolbus. And an issue a lot of the Changeman monsters encounter, of which Zolbus is one of them. Basically, any of the ones where it's like a weird alien name and kind of looks old is probably from Changeman. I think there might have been some like miscommunication in the prompt asking because they only sent in headshots instead of the full body, which is not a lot to go off of. I can see some potential with Zolbus, but Kendo Mask is doing just enough to win this match with his camp factor and his cool colors. Match 203, Dr. Obular versus Advanced Yokai Konakiji. And finally, a doctor who has a monster form and a regular guy form. I feel like there's design inspo that I'm not fully deciphering. The face is really grotesque to me, which isn't bad in this case because I think he's supposed to be really ugly. Like, I think it's supposed to show kind of that dichotomy. In the last video, we had another monster based off of the yokai Konakiji, and I thought it was really ugly, but this guy, he's able to deliver on like the crying old man inspiration while also having like a cool bomb secondary theming. So with taking all that into consideration, plus like the colors that this guy has, I think Konakiji is going to end up winning, although Dr. Obular, I get what you're going for. Match 204, Pan Minosaur versus Manaville. And what is it with the Jark matter monsters trending towards like unreasonably long necks? I mean, the colors are nice, especially like the red, white, and blue, but that's about it. Pan Minosaur, who's based off of a satyr, has like a sick skull design on its chest. I love the way that it like wraps around his arms, and the furry pants are still giving like satyr vibes. He also has magnetism powers with his horns, which I like to think is because satyrs are attracted to tons of stuff. Like the wind, in this case. Match 205, Magnet World versus Ariake no Kata. And I think it's such a shame that the worlds, like the world monsters, don't get a fully thought out costume. Because even though we've seen many a magnet monster, and we will continue to see many a magnet monster, I like the parts of him that are kind of samurai in design, like the sword magnets and the helmet that also doubles as a magnet. If there were a full costume of this, he might have won over Ariake, because even though Ariake has like a full design concept, it's not giving like a ton of new things. It kind of seems like a Nickelback version of that whole monster family. But with that being said, it's still enough to beat the awful bodysuit of Magnet World, so Ariake will be moving on. For match 206, we have Amakiri versus Lady Earring. And Amakiri is kind of giving, like, if they made an Edward Scissorhands sequel in the Land of Oz, this would be the villain. And she's very cool. I like the bright colors, and the mix of, like, the sharp scissors and the geometric design is all very nice contrast. Both signs are done in a very, like, non-conventional way that I really appreciate. Lady Earring is the second of like the three jewelry ladies that we've seen so far, and she's a lot better than Lady Ring was, but there's still quite a few design choices that are super confusing to me, like the vampire fangs and the long hair, so Amakiri will be giving her a haircut and scissoring into the next round. Match 207, Sairajin versus Energy Beast Okalampa. Sairajin is an alien rhino child, and Okalampa is hermit crab inspired, and the main enlarging mechanic of his season, like the way that the monsters grow, making all of the Dogglers even bigger disappointments. Sairajin has something kind of adorable about him, looking like the not-so-innocent toddler that he's supposed to be. Okalampa has a relatively cool design for his season, like in context of all the Dogglers, but I would expect more from such an important role in the grand mythos of Power Rangers. Like, normally the enlargers kind of need a specific like personality or design inspiration that I'm not really seeing with Okalampa. Sairajin wins. Match 208, the Gariburu versus Fandaho of Nonsense. And one of them has nonsense in its name, and yet it's the Gariburu that leaves me saying, what the fuck is this? It has the same mouth papules as many a Rick and Morty character, and overall it's just very gross to look at. Fandejo is supposed to be based on the Fantastic Four, which is impossible to guess based on the Hornet look of him. But sure, whatever. Nonsense will be moving on regardless. Match 209 is going to be Intergalactic Hitman Gigantes versus Bird Fang Mask. This is a strangely hard one for me because Gigantes is a pretty effective alien design. I like the things coming out of his chest, and the deep blue is really nice. Bird Fang Mask, coming in with a very confusing name, because birds don't have fangs, has the makings of an amazing Scooby-Doo villain with like the crazy eye mask and the color outfit. It's a toughie, but I think I prefer the like creepy, campy style of Bird Fang Mask in this case. Match 210, we have Trinoid 21 Reindeer Santa versus Sonic Megas. So this Trinoid, as we discussed last time, is three things. That's three right there. Specifically, reindeer, Santa, and hemp for some reason. I don't know why we needed to know that Trinoid 21 is a stoner, but I love that. And Sonic Megas is pretty serviceable, but I don't know how much speakers really contribute positively to his overall look. So in this case, 21 will be winning. Match 211, Monongin Moth versus Spider Evo. And despite the regular food chain on this one, the match is going to go to Monongin Moth. Spider Evo has some things I really like about it, like the actual like black spider, the green eye system, but the rest of it doesn't really work as well when compared to the parts that I do like about it. Monongin Moth is based on a bagworm moth, which make casings that look like this white part, but with twigs and other natural stuff. It's not a cigarette like I originally thought it was. Monongin Moth looks so like scary to me, and still is able to give off moth. So that is an amazing feat. He's also one of the 5 jesters that I've mentioned before from his season, and he will be moving on to round 2. Match 212, Anglerfish Nezire versus Mad Scientist Genbu. And I normally think that the Nezires do a pretty good job, but this one doesn't do it for me, like, at all. And, like, the gills on the chest are just not great. The lips are a miss for me. I would like Genbu more if it had, like, a more interesting color to look at. But it's still pretty good, especially compared to its competition. So I'll take it into the next round. But I'm kind of disappointed in you, Anglerfish Nezire. I wanted better. Match 213, Cosmic Kempo Master Pachamok 12 versus Traffic Light World. And no, absolutely not. They decided, okay, go with me. So they decided to do only the top head of the design for this season. And then, even when picking a traffic light, they used only one of the 3 colors of the traffic light. No, and like the baseball pants aren't going to save you. Pachamok is a very sick, Incan-inspired design, and he didn't even have to go this hard against Traffic Light World, but I'm glad he did just to save the reputation of the tournament, basically. Like, I'm glad some people are bringing their all. Match 214, Jack-O-Lantern Minosaur versus Desperado. And I really like many a thing about Desperado, like the oil color scheme and the different animal faces all over. But there's something holding it back, and I can't quite put my finger on it. It might be the face, it might be like the 2 pixels worth that he sent it in on, but Jack-O-Lantern Minosaur, like many Minosaurs, is thought out from top to bottom. I like that every part of the pumpkin is being shown in his body, and the teeth add a layer of horror that I really like for a Halloween monster, so he will be moving on in this case. Match 215, Neanderthal Jamin versus Camera Dimension. And step 1, make all of your monsters from the season have the same bodysuit. Step 2, for this monster specifically, only show the bodysuit in the show and call it a different Jamin for some reason. And finally, step 3, lose the first round of the biggest Super Sentai tournament ever, because Neanderthal Jamin is giving us nothing. Camera Dimension is pretty effective, all things considered, and the part where it just says camera instead of the brand name is so funny to me. He'll be moving on. Match 216, Hatena versus Dora Unicorn. And just a quick clarification, this is not the Hatena from Pokemon, and in fact, it is giving a uncommon L for the player's faction. I think it's kind of cool how the real body is the hat, but overall, I don't know if the concept of a scholar-themed monster really works that well. I don't think it's scary enough or campy enough to really be that effective. Dora Unicorn takes a more masculine take on unicorns, which I've loved ever since Adventure Time and Yu-Gi-Oh! His suit is pretty cool too, so he'll be moving on for me. Match 217, Animal Tamer Org versus Fast Talking Wanderer. I really like both of these. I think an Animal Tamer for an animal-themed season, which would eventually become Wild Force, is pretty fun. And I love the spiked rivets on his legs. Fast Talking Wanderer is a microphone, and it would be easy to make it camp and just end there, like with the face being the microphone. But no, they went and they gave him very detailed and very well done clothes that anyone would be happy to wear. The cape mimicking the pattern of the microphone is just very good. It's one of the subtle touches that I really, really enjoy in Power Rangers design. And so overall, I'm going to give it to the fast-talking Wanderer. Match 218, Juzian Brady versus Transport Nezalar. And many a mantis-based monster have existed. And Brady might be the worst of all of them in terms of actually representing a mantis. Transport Nezalar is doing some very fun things with geometry and has many places to look at as you digest the design, which I think is important for any kind of more complex designs. You got to give us some breathing room sometimes. So Transport for the win in this case. Match 219, Bombs versus Hades Dread Knight Guru. And I must preface, his name is Bombs, but he's actually based on cannonballs. So get over that real quick. But also, I'd like to appreciate the two similarly built big boys in this match. As always, I'm a big fan of big boys. I think Guru is going to end up taking it because of the brass knuckles and overall variety in his design. It just makes him more fun to look at. Match 220, Love Sickness Ninja Cupid versus Queen Ahemes. And I do love this little Cupid-themed rat. He's got kind of like a paparazzi aura about him, but as is the case, cats eat rats, and Ahemes is going to take it, mostly because she has two really effective designs that have fully thought out outfits, whereas Cupid only has the upper body working for him, which is going to hold him back in this case. Ahemes wins. Match 221, Skyfist Demon Kata versus Horitsudo, one of the three mentors to Daishi, and the first one with obviously a sky theming. And I just really like the general aesthetic of like the tattered cloth and the hollow bones that make up his headdress. I think that's a really smart way to appeal to the bird sensibilities of your design without making it so overtly obvious. Like we see in a lot of his design, like feathers and wings are obviously, of course, what you first think of with bird. But I love the little details of like the hollow bones, things like that. Horitsudo is pretty cool too with his crab and kabuki theming. And it's really well done from like a patterns standpoint. But overall, I'm giving it to Kata this time, making it so that he will get revenge for the Sanyo versus Dodomusha match, where once again, these two great factions battled it out. Match 222, Bomb Maker DD Latus versus Dora Knight. And I mostly remember Latus from the Time Force episode where he didn't want to be a bad guy anymore. But in the American version, they left out the part where he was a bomb maker, which is hilarious because, like, I don't know a ton of people who make bombs out of desperation, but either way, I don't know your life. Pop off, King. Dora Knight is going to be the winner here. His outfit is way more cohesive and nice to look at. But I wish DD Latus the best in his Reformation arc. I hope that you're able to stay out of prison this time. Match 223, Unyudo versus Neo Bat Nezire. And Unyudo is best described on the wiki as the loser son of the Yokai Bank's owner, which kind of sums up how I feel about him. In the sense that he is not delivering on his potential even slightly. Neo Bat Nezire has cool asymmetrical uses of the bat wings that make him much more interesting to look at. So, sorry Unyudo, you won't be beating the loser allegations here. Neo Bat Nezire wins. Match 224, Salamandem versus Viruson. And these are two more heavy hitters. Salamandem is a monster based on coral and volcanic lava flows, which is really well done with like the purple rock background. I could give or take the metal tubes. I don't really understand how those fit into the design, but overall, it's very nice color choices. Viruson is one of three monsters that are based off of theories for why the dinosaurs went extinct. This one is like a plague of some sort. I love the faces scattered all over the body. But Salamandem edges out just slightly for me. So, sorry, Viruson, we found a cure for whatever you've got going on, and you will be sent to the Losers Club. Match 225, Abouta of the Research versus Kantoku. And I think I would be inclined to give it to Abouta, but it has some like mismatched symmetry that I don't really think works for him. Shot very high, but didn't entirely hit in terms of his goals. Kantoku has some little things that really stand out, like the cut and the action signs, the clapperboard axe, the colors they went with. Very much give like Squid Game or like Kids Show. Kantoku edges out because he grows on me the more I look at him, which I think is a good sign of design if there's always more to digest. Match 226, Elecbrain versus Igwa Dogler. And Elecbrain with a few tweaks could be so much better. namely fixing the limbs and using the yellow and blue throughout more parts of his body. I think that's a really good color combo. Luckily for him, Iguodogler is pretty hideous to look at, and to my understanding, the headpiece can pop off to be a separate creature, which is doing nothing but creeping me out more on a design that I already don't like very much. So Brain is going to win in this case. Match 227, Dragonmonger versus Garon. And do you remember Jan, our very first loser in this very long tournament? I mentioned that Jan combines with another monster, and here we are. Garon is the counterpart, and unfortunately for him, he's going to lose just like Jan. I'm going to be so for real. The red and blue fire on Dragonmonger is the main reason that he's moving on, because besides that, he's pretty mid. But I do love some good red and blue fire. Match 228, Tire Org versus Dradian Goldum. Tire Org is another one I remember fondly from childhood watch-throughs of Wild Force, specifically him kidnapping Princess Shayla. I'm happy to say that he is as cool looking as I remember, specifically with like the little tires everywhere, and the red and black leather works so well together in most cases. Dradian tried his best, but overall there's just a lot of things that are kind of generic alien about him. So he'll be getting run over by the Tire Org. Match 229, Beautician Domiro versus Hawkeiser. What business does Domiro have telling anyone how to be more beautiful? It does okay at that like clinical kind of outfit, but it's still pretty boring, especially when stacked up against Hawkeiser, one of the evil rangers from his season. It's a wash. The red and white and black all looks just so pleasing to the eye. The flame and the red X are specific high points to me in this round, so he'll be moving on. Match 230, Vega Brain versus Zamuzin Sheik. So let's talk about our winner, Sheik, for a second first. The gold and the black works really well, and honestly, the proportions are where the design shines for me. Like, it could have a lot going on, but it's all distance out enough that it can shine separately without overcrowding itself. Now, on to Vega Brain. He's ugly, but that doesn't matter right now. The plot line of this creature is that he impregnates the green Sentai of his season, who is a male, and refuses to let him go to an abortion clinic until the baby is born, and then decides that the baby is a failure for not being evil enough, and kills it, and then the green Sentai kills him in revenge, and is like traumatized forever, obviously. And that is insanity. That is absolute insanity, and I love it so much. Match 231, Plugma Org versus Nightmare Ninja Yumebakushi. And at first, I was really tempted to give it to Yumebakushi because of the nice like yellow and purple. But let me put this Plugma design into perspective. The gray parts are the cord covering, and the gold parts, or the copper parts, I guess, are the exposed metal underneath, telling a story about like an old wire or plug that has been slowly decayed by the sheer amount of electricity going through this monster. And it's a very close call, but I think that kind of design storytelling is enough to put Plugma above Yumebakushi in this case. Match 232, Hades Warrior God Wyvern versus Moth Mozu. And Wyvern is one of the 12 gods from Magiranger, otherwise known as Mystic Force in America. And they're all the best at something. That's kind of their whole deal, is that they're all immaculate in one way or another. And in this case, he is the fastest, and he's also based on a wyvern, obviously. And I love the green and black accents all over. I think that's a really good color pairing. I really want Moth Mozu to be better because I like the idea of using different moths in a hodgepodge kind of way. I think that's interesting. I think moths have enough variety to really make that work well. But in function, this one doesn't look very well done. So Wyvern will be moving on in this case. Match 233, Sunidokeloid versus Resentful Knight Endolf. And this match is a great example of delivery on design concept. Sunidokeloid is based off of an hourglass, which you can probably see now that I mention it, but despite some of the stuff in the chest, the rest of his design is pretty lackluster, and I don't know that it really screams, like, hourglass, you know? Endolf is another one of the emotional knights. This one is based off of resentment, which is such a specific emotion, but it's so well represented in the design, using the concept of the wick burning down to signify the lack of long-term viability of this emotion, the flames covering the whole body in an engulfing way. Endolf is absolutely winning. I could talk about his design all day. Match 234, Entotsuki versus Spechionian Genio. And I don't love that Entotsuki is going to win this because his design is very much a redo of a different one with a different colored bodysuit. But Genio is like is just the king of boring, honestly. Like, his armor is all right, I guess, but the rest of him looks so cheap. And like, if you used black tarp to make a skirt, and Entotsuki, I mean, just get out of my face before I change my mind. Match 235, Behemoth of Darkness versus Chief of Staff Damaris. And I love the concept of using the main base of the villains as the final boss of the series. And let me be clear, these are both very strong designs in very different ways. But the giant eyes and the overall triangular shape of the behemoth kind of holds him back for me, even though I love the look overall. Damaris is from the Pirate season, and I love the kind of like shoulder back drape of his cape, and the bronze overall is very well executed, giving the look and the feel of armor in like all the right places. Specifically, the thigh armor lines and like the chest shelf are both very nice to look at. Damaris wins, but it is a very, very close match. Match 236, Benetsuki versus Kanedagami. And honestly, one of the biggest gripes I have with like the key monsters is that their bodysuits are so good by themselves, and then they sometimes like plop heads on it that don't make any sense with the body, as we saw a few matches ago. Benetsuki luckily is not this way, and in fact, it almost seems like this was their original head match for the suits before they decided to just add different heads on. Kanedagami is really nice to look at, but it's almost too much sometimes. It's like based on a stove and the general concept of sound, and also like the Q-Rex from Time Force, you know, the giant T-Rex. I don't know. Benetsuki wins. That's the important part. Match 237, Machine Gun Jaguar versus Trinoid 20, Rugira Fleshia. Holy fumbling the ball, Batman. Rugia Fleshia is based on lipstick, giraffes, and the Rafflesia flower, which is poisonous, and most notably, I think most people would know of it from Vileplume from Pokemon. That's kind of the flower that it's based off of. Also Venusaur from Pokemon. And like, the annoying thing is they're all things that I think positively of. And yet, combined to like this, absolute miss. It doesn't even super look like a Rafflesia, and having the lipstick coming out of the giraffe is definitely a choice. I think if I had to redo it, I would give it the shape and the structure of the Rafflesia still, and make it like more well done, with the patterning of the giraffe all over the flower and all over the body, just to kind of give something nicer to look at. Maybe even like a giraffe head still, but definitely not three of them. Give it like a lipstick sword instead of whatever monstrosity is currently happening, and I think we're finally kind of on the way to getting something that I actually like. Machine Gun Jaguar is going to win because, I mean, come on. It's a Machine Gun Jaguar. Who could say no to that? Match 238, Guinness versus Junk Lloyd, and Junk indeed. I mean, I think I covered with Trash Dimension how easy it would be for a trash monster to look muddled and disinteresting, and I praised Trash Dimension on how it was able to avoid that. I think, unfortunately, Junk Lloyd did not avoid that. I think it does look muddled and disinteresting, and Guinness is the main villain of his season, and on the wiki it says that he loves to play with the lives of others. And based on his godly design, I can definitely get that impression. It successfully looks very alien and very regal and very like deity all at the same time, which I love, so he'll be getting the win in this case. Match 239, Halloween World versus Octopus Evo. And for what it's worth, the actual design and geometry of Octopus Evo would probably win. But of all the colors that an octopus can be, I'm specifically thinking of like a blue ring octopus because they're like beautiful, but there's tons of other variations. They pick like a flesh color with all of these little like veins running throughout. It reminds me of like dissection day in biology class, and that's just, it's not a good memory for most people. Halloween World is doing a pretty good job of hitting all of the different marks with Halloween, and it's not liver colored, so he will be moving on. Match 240, Sorrowful Night Aigeron versus Zakatsu. And oh god, this one is so close. I really like a lot of things about Zakatsu, including the geometry and the pattern. The kind of like emotional nights that we saw with Endolf and also Aigeron deliver on not one, not two, but three different designs all at the same time, which is why I love them so much, I think, because there's just so much that went into it. Aigeron is based off of Sorrow, obviously, but he's also based on the Tin Man from Wizard of Oz and the Spades suit from Playing Cards. And I just love the way that it obviously gives references to all of those things without being too cluttered design-wise. I think people could learn a lot from the Emotional Nights in terms of how they do all of those things effectively. Aigeron wins. Match 241, Confrontation Beast, Pangolin Fist, Musenkos versus Quester Robo Turbo. And the Quester Robos are very hit or miss for me, and this one is a big miss for me. He looks like a Decepticon reject, and meanwhile, I have a weakness for pangolins in general. I think they're very cute. They're very spiky, which I enjoy. And although he doesn't really capture that cuteness that pangolins normally have, the overall like armor work is done so well all over the body. There's a lot of nice details to look at. So Musenkos will be moving on. Match 242, Space Time Mammoth versus Saber Dogler. Am I a joke to you? Are we as a viewing community a joke to you? Your name is Saber Dogler, and based on the name, I'd expect something cool, or even just like serviceable, maybe even just like a sword somewhere. And instead, we've got an ugly snake wearing a blue version of Simba's leaf mane. And why? Like all of that work, and it still looks ugly. I just don't understand. Spacetime Mammoth isn't even really that great, but he moves on because at least it doesn't feel like he's actively insulting me just by being in the room. Match 243, Aminjim versus Mushikagaloid. And the best part about Mushikagaloid is that he's a bug cage fighting a fighting bug in Aminjim. And that's it. Like, that's the cool thing about him. Like, based on what he's based on, it's an effective interpretation, but why would we even do a monster based on that? Like, who thinks that like a cage for bugs is like a great design inspo? Normally, I really hate the the thing of like they just ran out of ideas because like no one would ever run out of ideas. That's not really how that works. But I do think they could have allocated resources to make a better monster. Even like a bug zapper would have been more interesting. Anyway, Amin Jim, king of the golden hour with that amazing picture, is based on a water strider, and it's all just so appealing. The ripple designs throughout his body, the way that the white bodysuit is used in conjunction with like the black, the blue, and the gold all over his body is just so nice to look at. And who knew that of all the bugs, a water strider could serve this much? Amin Jim wins. Match 244, the Taffmoss versus Devil BEM. The Taffmoss is highly confusing to look at, which isn't always bad, but in this case, like the one eye is like a... and similar choices are very not good. Devil BEM is a simple mask with a simple outfit, and sometimes, just sometimes, that is a good option when utter chaos is your enemy. So BEM wins here. Match 245, Archpriest Gaja versus Golf Jamin. And Gaja is kind of a great example of things to avoid in a main villain design. The shapes are like sloppy and nonsensical, the accessories make no sense, and overall, he seems like what someone would think of for like an over-the-top parody version of Power Rangers, rather than like an actual villain from one of the seasons. Golf Jamin, unlike other Jamins, has a very nice mask and little details that, specifically among the Jamin, works really well. Like the drawing and the face shapes being different features of a golf course are so effective, and the little like details are just really nice to look at overall. And I think that's important when the head is the only thing that you're really able to look at. Golf Jamin moves on. Match 246, Susukodama versus Wojonian Jinch. Susukodama are these little balls that fall from the rafters to laugh at whatever is going on in either the Samurai show or the Shikinger show. And they're just meant to be like generally annoying and kind of whimsical. And I actually really like their design for what their role is. And fun fact, they're also based on the little like soot guys, the little like spidery little fellas from the Miyazaki films. Specifically, I remember them in Spirited Away. But unfortunately, they just can't stand up to like a full body design. Jinch has some cool claws, and that's about all I can give him. But he will be moving on because, like, as much as I love the Susukodama, like they're just little guys, and I can't do anything with that. Match 247, Hacker Brain versus Illusion Nezalar. And Hacker Brain gets points for having that, like, pseudo face on his midsection. That's very camp. But overall, the actual head and top of his body is doing nothing for me, especially the, like, flesh-colored shoulders. Illusion Nezalar seems to actually be more of, like, a teleportation monster, but I think that works fine with his concept. And just to give you a peek inside my mind, like, Hacker Brain gets a +2 and then a -4. Even though Illusion Nezalar only gets like a +1, that's still overall higher than Hacker Brain. So he's going to move on, even though there are more things I like about Hacker Brain. Match 248, Eris versus Iron Snake Mask. And it does, in fact, have iron, snake, and mask concepts, but they're not cohesive, and they're not well done. Eras has such a cool smattering of red and black, and it's such a nice subversion of like the white and black chessboard design from her underlings. Overall, I think Eras clearly wins. Match 249, Wolk versus Stage World. And Wolk is the other half of Kilt from the last video. And as you can see, the black and white theming continues very strongly here. I wish the tights were white, but that's okay. I can forgive that. Stage World takes the same bodysuit as all of the world monsters and makes a terrible, like, recreation of it for a live show that I guess they had for this season. So it's going to be a no for me. Wolk wins. Match 250, Dark Green versus Poison Flower Ninja Hanasaka Dushi. Okay, so a little explanation for these ones. These are supposed to be like dark versions of the original Power Rangers. So hypothetically, red, blue, yellow, pink, and black. But based on like the one photo of them that I can find anywhere, I am not seeing the colors that they're mentioning. I don't know why that is. It just is what that is. So I'm calling this one dark green because it's a Dark Ranger and it's the color that I'm seeing when I look at the image, just so that you know who I'm talking about. Anyway, Hanasaka Dushi wins for very obvious reasons. I'm sure I'll have a rant about why I don't like the Dark Rangers later, but I already spent way too much time explaining why I called this one dark green anyway. Match 251, Necromancer Minosaur versus Maraiki. And Necromancer Minosaur has kind of a dopey face for what he's based off of. Like, normally I don't think of Necromancers as that. But he also has kind of like a dodo-looking face, which I like to believe is a reference because it's like a very notorious extinct animal. Maraiki is a reference to what would eventually become Time Force. And if you like squint, which is my resting state to be fair, you can see when some elements of Circuit, the like blue owl, were used for him. Overall, though, it isn't my favorite. It's not super obvious that that's what they were going for. Mostly because there's nowhere for you to really like fix your eyes on, as I was talking about earlier. That's really important if you have complicated design. Necromancer wins in this case. Match 252, the Dusura versus Madame Noir. And the Dusura is the monstrous form of the main villain from Flashman. And Madame Noir is the matriarch of the Shadows from Tukyoger. And Noir takes it pretty easily in this case. I think the jewel tone purple, the mix of Victorian fashion and eldritch horror, is such like a fun mashup. And although Dusura works well enough, it's just not next level like Noir is. Match 253, Bat Nezire versus Hound Shadow. And unlike Neo Bat Nezire, which we saw earlier in the round, his predecessor Bat Nezire will not pass this round because he's up against Hound Shadow, who would fit right in at like a FNAF reunion mixer. Like, I love the creepy details all over his body. It's just enough to be like satisfying to look at while also still like silhouetted and unknown and dark enough to still be really like scary. I think he's one of the few Power Ranger monsters that would scare me IRL if I saw it in like any setting, basically. Match 254, Vacance's World versus Antlion Nezare. And in terms of an animal to base a monster off of, antlions are pretty cool in terms of function, but not so cool in terms of what they look like. Specifically because they don't have a ton of identifying features, and the decision to use both the adult and larva form doesn't help. The yellow and brown looks more like a bee or a termite to me than an antlion. And Vacance's isn't doing too much, but it's a pretty camp design, and I could ignore the bodysuit in this case for just all the little extra details they put into it, so he'll just barely move on. Match 255, Sigorn versus Mason. This one is fun because these two are actually allies who worked very closely together in their show, and now I'm forcing them to duke it out. Sigorn has a cool kind of Ashura design with the multiple faces, but I almost wish they would have gone further with it because the rest of the design is kind of boring to look at. Mason's purple coloring and white accents almost look more like a Sentai outfit than a villain, but either way, I enjoy it much more than Sigorn. Mason moves on. Match 256, Mizogu of the Clump versus Volta, and Volta is just a silly little guy. He's not ready for these clumps of defeat he's about to receive. The chest piece on Mizogu alone could have probably won the match, but like the overall like scarab blue and gold design is just immaculate to look at. I don't know why he's of the clump, but he's also of the winner's circle. Match 257, Hades Org versus Bird Mozu. And Hades Org is one of a trio of orgs that are counterparts to the three Greek god brothers. And this one takes more inspiration from the traditional portrayal of Hades than the fire and brimstone one that we think of, being more of like a silent, creepy afterlife. Either way, it's all more effective than the poor Bird Mozu, who I just don't really have much to say about. He will be getting buried by Hades in this case, who will be moving on to the next round. Match 258, Gokei Raijin versus Jade Mask. And Gokei Raijin is based on a cockroach, and it's alright, but like the red gets a little one note considering it's all over the entire body. I like the little touches of green. I kind of wish it was more all over to just kind of give some good balance. Jade Mask is an interesting one because it's from the first season, and I feel like when you're this multicolored, there's like a threshold where like you look like a hot mess until you start to look beautiful, and luckily Jade Mask has gone to the higher level. I think the center lines of the torso are partially responsible for that because it gives some like calmness to the overall design. Either way, Jade Mask for the win. Match 259, Mobile Commander Barashitara versus Violent Food Saima Beast Juki. And this is a battle of the gold. Barashitara has a very cool camp design, and there are a few things I like about it, but Juki is a fossil beast, and I like how even the non-fossil parts are within theme, being like mud or clay colored. So Juki is going to be winning. Match 260, Sword Brain versus Diamond Monger. These both have an issue where they don't super deliver on their theme. Sword Brain will get more points strictly for having more elements of a swordsman, but Diamond Monger doesn't have much I can see that says diamond besides like the examiner glass for like appraising diamonds. Swordbrain wins, but I still expect to see more out of you in round 2. Match 261, Baron String versus Grand Marshal Deathmark. And Baron String is very campy, but at the end of the day, it's simply not enough to beat Deathmark, who has a very nice use of like black and gold. I would genuinely love a pair of these exact pants. And the cape in this case actually looks cool and not ridiculous, which I think is very impressive. So he'll be moving on. Match 262, Earth Curiosities Beast Anagmus versus Drill Horse. And Anagmus is the main researcher of the team, and I very much respect him for that. But at the end of the day, his design is just not enough. Kind of similar to Okalumpa in the sense that, like, if you were a main member of the team, I expect you to have a memorable design. And he just doesn't in this case. Drill Horse has a really awesome use of black and white arrows all over. And although the under neck area isn't my favorite, it's going to move Drill Horse into the next round. Match 236, Automon versus Iron Cage Mask. And Automon is another one like Tesla from the first video, where they're reused from a separate show altogether. In this case, it's actually a mashup of two of the heroes from Astralborgs. Iron Cage Mask is kind of cool, but it could use some like serious polish. I don't love the way that he just looks like dusty in general. Either way, Automon is going to win. Match 264, Takumi Gami versus Kyoryuki. And a bunch of these Gami monsters are based off of antiquity. And in this case, it's an old-timey gun called an arquebus. And part of the downside of that is that the old iron look of everything isn't always my favorite. Like, sometimes in small helpings, it can be interesting to look at. But overall, it just reminds me of things that look old and decayed, which isn't really like an aesthetic that I love a ton. Kyoryuki suffers from the same issue as a lot of the same suited monsters, but I love the fossils and the bones all over him. So bronze beats iron in this case. Kyoryuki will win this match. Match 265, Messerju versus Nunchuck Bankai. And I don't know why necessarily, but Nunchuck Bankai is more appealing to me in this case. I think part of this is like the nice emerald mixed with the silver and gold. I feel like there are a few simple things that Messerju could have done to be next level, but as it currently stands, I don't feel much when I look at it, so Nunchuck is going to win. Match 266, Gaba Kababachi versus Emperor Tronza. And let's start with our loser, Tronza. I like a lot about this, like the black and white uniform, but the like toothpaste hair is not doing it for me. Gaba Kabapachi is a fantastic design. Like the black and the pink is so nice together, and the open mouths that make like a cool like shoulder and hip moment are very nice. I feel like I would love to see a interpretation of this on like Drag Race or something, where kind of the hips and shoulders are kind of meant to be the focal points in some ways. I also love the use of the dark blue as an accent color for this design. I feel like that's a good trio to kind of round out like the pink and the black together. Gabat wins, and it's a pretty triumphant win too. Match 267, Time Monger versus Anger Brain. And Time Monger is bad. No lie. Like, especially the, like, lopsided horn and, like, the weird eyes. But in a tale as old as time, at least he's giving me something. Like, Anger Brain has a hypothetically cooler inspiration, but it just doesn't deliver. Which is disappointing for me, because Anger is great. I love it so much. So, Time Monger will be moving on in this case. Match 268, Rairaiken versus Wire Mask. And Rairaiken has some very sick orange and black, and Wire Mask is fine. Nothing super special. Even the mask doesn't really give wire inspirations to me, so Rairaiken will be winning. Match 269, Mad Bomber Jekar versus Kuwarshin Dazganeller. I really like the ladybug inspirations here on Jekar, while still having like the kind of like robotic spiky theme. Dazganeller isn't bad, but once again, like if you have an octopus monster, why are we so stuck on the flesh and pink colors? Like, I get it. Octopodes can look that way, but they don't have to. There's many other colors that you could do. Also, it's fantasy. Make them whatever color you want. But no, they keep picking flesh colored, and I hate it. And the dopey face doesn't help. So Mad Bomber Jekar will be winning. Match 270, Witch of the Stagnant Sea, Numajo versus Poison Fang Mask. And there are a lot of really cool ways that you could do a Poison Fang monster. And this, like, rejected Scooby-Doo monster is not it. Numajo isn't giving much beyond just, like, human outfit with monster mask. But at least it's done relatively well, so Numajo will be winning. Match 271, Danganloid 2 versus Scorpio. And Scorpio has a lot more potential with that theming than his design shows off. I don't love the tan pants. Most of it's working for me besides that, but it's still not really giving like Scorpion a ton. Danganloid is based on a cyborg, which, like, if you are a robot themed around a cyborg, I mean, like, sure, I guess. Like, it feels weird to be like, I don't know. It's fine. It's fine. Scorpio for the win, but, like, just by a hair. Match 272, Ozchuin Eel versus Telephone Mask. And I think my big problem with many of the SPD or Deca Ranger monsters is that they don't have like a super original inspiration. But for this one, in this case, I'm happy to say that is not the issue. Red and black poison dart frog colors work really well, and I love the like patterning that goes along with that. All of it is just really working super well for me. Telephone Mask is a telephone on a black suit, and it just doesn't go anywhere besides that. And yeah, it's going to be Eel for the win. Match 273, Gnome Minosaur versus Sea Fist Demon Regoku. And Regoku is that queen. She is the second of the Daishi mentors, and she is the aquatic one. She's based on a jellyfish. I think the corset and the general like royalty feeling of her is very elegant. It kind of matches with her personality of being like a like manipulator and kind of like a people pleaser in that way. I just love it so much. No Minosaur, I was kind of expecting more from you. Like, you're the gnome Minosaur, like that should be cool. He just has like the head of a beetle and also the head of a gun. I don't know. Regoku wins. Match 274, Lethal Dogler versus Bara Boxer. And Lethal Dogler is just another in a long line of disappointments. I like him better than some of the other Doglers, but that's not really saying much. Also, though, I love Bara Boxer. I like the colors a lot. Blue and bronze is really good, especially for that specific era and theming. All of the Boxer inspirations are just done so well. Bara Boxer is a knockout win in this case. Match 275, Confrontation Beast Chameleon Fist Melee versus Peacock Mozu. And these are two beautiful green animal inspirations battling it out. I think Melee is a hard fight regardless, with like the pretty green and purple with like the yellow accents sprinkled in. Peacock Mozu is pretty cute for a knockoff cereal mascot, but it's not going to win against Melee, unfortunately. Sorry, bud. Try better next time. Melee will be moving on. Match 276, Vending Machine Dimension versus Zonos. I think my issue here is that Vending Machine Dimension looks more like a gremlin eating a vending machine than an actual vending machine monster. And I know that's nitpicking, but like even then, this type of vending machine isn't like super recognizable to me. I know that obviously it's like from Japan, but it's just not bringing enough from a visual angle. Zonos isn't all that inspired, but I like the colors and the patterns just enough to give him a ticket to the next round. Match 277, Zora Dogler versus Karakurilar. And ooh on both fronts. Absolutely. I mean, kudos to Zora Dogler for having a well-lit picture and sharing a name with a cool race from The Legend of Zelda. You will move on, so we'll deal with you next round. But Karakurilar is just awful to look at. It's supposed to be based off of like wooden puppets, and yet the way they decided to represent this was with an awful human skin and flesh monster with horrifying proportions. So that is going to be an absolute no for me. Match 278, Crab Evo versus Nopera Boma. And this one is a hard one for me because on one level I respect the sheer like horror aspect of Nopera Boma, whose like whole thing is switching people's faces until eventually they lose their faces to look kind of like him, which is horrifying. But on the other hand, he's just a white tube with a mouth. So I can't really see giving him a win over Crab Evo. Crab Evo's doing some cute things with the crab theming. It's not my favorite, but I mean, he is objectively giving more than Nopera Boma, so he will be moving on. Match 279, Tengu Mozu versus Onryan Baildon. And the unfortunate thing about this match is that Tengu Mozu, like, really fumbles the bag. The wings work well, the colors aren't bad, but whenever I, like, break out my little microscope, the eyes aren't symmetrical, the nose looks very, like, mushy, and the vest makes him look like he has, like, an empty Bjorn. Like, where's your baby, homeboy? Who knows? As far as Bjorn, rhinos have looked better and a lot worse, and I think the different kinds of armor in different locations is at least interesting to look at. And I would have loved having a different color than snot green for the skin, but, like, it's fine. I can get over it. Henri and Baildon will move on. Match 280, Gollum Minosaur versus Bara Separate. And here we have another close one, the Battle of the Shapes. I think Bara Separate has a really nice color scheme, and the star is interesting, even if I don't completely understand, like, why it's there. I think the team over at the Baranoi Empire could use some help with the naming conventions. But also, in terms of understanding why stuff is there, I can say the same thing for the orange parts on Gollum. I don't quite understand. I feel like I should get it. Like, I feel like there's an inspo or a reason why it's there that I'm just not understanding. But at the end of the day, I don't understand it, and I wish someone would explain it to me because I want to know. Either way, the craters and cracks are really well done, and the proportions are refreshing for a monster. Gollum wins this time, but it's a good showing from Bara Separate. Match 281, OO Baton versus HHDO. And there's one thing I'm proud of OO Baton for doing right off the bat, pun intended, and that's going up against such a loser. Like, I'm glad that you were able to luck out in this way. Jokes aside, Baton looks like a drunk Ai, which is kind of charming, especially for the turbo monsters, especially against Dio, whose, like, red eyes and teeth are very, like, off-putting and don't seem to have a reason. Like, he's based off of a baseball, so you could have made him look however you wanted, but you chose this, and now we all have to live with that. Baton is moving on. Match 282, High Priest Saw versus Bibi Koya. I like the way that High Priest Saw has a lot going for him, design and color-wise, besides just his namesake. Like, the red and the black and the gold all work really well, and it gives High Priest very well. And they could have easily just been like, well, he's just a Saw monster. No, he's giving it all. Koya, while reminding me of several of my more rural relatives, is overall very boring, just like they are. And I like the geometry, but that's about it. Saw is going to win. Match 283, Dora Tortoise versus Giwi Newsy. And when first looking at Dora Tortoise, there's a lot to like from, like, a camp angle. I have no clue why they would match these two things up, but it's very fun to look at because of how earnestly it's done. However, when I look over at Giwi, this is, like, next level stuff right here. Like, the beautiful greens, the Plague Doctor mask, the kiwi eggs on his shoulders. It's all, like, so sleek and good to, like, delve into. There's so much to look at, so many details to absorb. It's just so wonderful. Giwi is going to get the green light, but I do love you, Dora Tortoise. Match 284, Samasatage versus Ogre Beard Monster. And another case where the camera quality is the true villain. Ogre Beard Monster is not helping himself with this blurry photo, but even from what I can garner, Sasamatage is the clear winner with its, like, dream-like swirls and its interesting use of round shapes. Overall, it's very interesting to look at. Match 285, Majin Dogler versus Speed Ninja Hayabusa. And I feel like the last few have been relative landslides, and that trend will continue here. Majin Dogler isn't too bad on the sliding scale of Doglers. But overall, it's going to go to Hayabusa. I love like the circular hawk design and the windy pattern of the outfit. He's one of 5 ninjas that fight the ninjers, and it's a great showing for them just in general. Match 286, Major Zydos versus Grim Reaper Minosaurs. Now, do I love a man in leather? Abso-freaking-lutely. Who wouldn't? I mean, they're just the best of us. But the cap and like the bald cap and the fingernails on the gloves are both big no-goes for me. If I saw someone dressed like that in real life, that would be a deal breaker. And although I wish Grim Reaper was like a little spookier, like we've seen with some of the other Minosaurs, like the Jack-o'-lantern, I do love the giant axes, the overall like Halloween Town vibes. Grim Reaper is going to take the win. Match 287, Keeper Rook versus Hacker Yugento. And is Stevie Nicks playing right now? Because I sense another landslide. Rook has the clear, better design. The white and black lines and clothing are very nice. I love the staff so much. It's just great monster design. I kind of wish his head was like a little bit different, but we'll discuss that later. Yugento has some cool white stuff going on, but it's not nearly enough to beat Keeper Rook. So Rook will be moving on. Match 288, Pain versus Samurai Camp. And it is not Pain from Naruto, although I kind of wish it was, because this Pain is known as a rocky, wart-filled monster. And that's about it. And although he does that pretty well, I don't know that I love the way that looks visually. Samurai Camp is part of a series of giant robots, just like most of the other camps, and this one is pretty effective. The giant sword is great. The way the metal plating makes him look even bigger is perfection. I love it. Samurai Camp will be moving on. Match 289, Bara Saucer versus Zyhodoron. Zyhodoron is a mashup of 2 other monsters from its season, which is something I don't always love because oftentimes there's no real like point to do it and it doesn't normally work very well. This is one of those cases. I think it took the worst part of Zyhon, who we've seen before. It took the head and it paired it with the body of Doran Bosu, which it just doesn't really fit in my opinion. Like I don't get why like an Inquisitor Crow and a treasure chest really work well together. Bara Saucer, my lovely jellyfish robot, is going to be the winner in this match. Match 290, Lenafel versus Eagle Monster. Eagle Monster, like, come on, man, what is this? Like, I almost want to give you points for being kind of like Totem-esque, but like, no, it's just done so bad. Lenefel's leopard and like metallic zebra print armor are very sleek. It works really well with her weapon she uses too. Overall, Lenafel is going to win. Match 291, Devil Sphinx versus Naria. And I love the specific shade of green on Naria based on Smith's the Knight's green variation. It's giving like candy, like a candy interpretation of green apple, which I love. Conversely, the like hollow metal and the way the patterning is done for Devil Sphinx is actually like super effectively done. I love seeing designs like this from the earlier seasons that show that budget isn't everything if you're willing to like put in the time for it. It's really close, but Naria has just done like slightly more due to some variation in colors and shapes. Good job, though, Sphinx. I'm a big fan of your work. Match 292, Gorma Emperor 15 versus Warikozu of the Gremlin. And as much as the blank canvas look of Gora 15 doesn't really do much for me, in fact, I think it's pretty boring. I do find Warikozu actively repulsive, and as we know, negatives will get you a lot further down than neutrals. And he's based on a flea and uses that like that gross skin color that we keep seeing in this group for some reason. And it's paired with like the nauseous green. It's a horrid combo. I hate the little like hairs sticking out. Gorma Emperor 15 wins. Match 293, Axe Megas versus Gundajim. And Axe Megas is another big black robot, and I love the shaping of the two axe blades. It's like the exact right thickness to really feel dangerous and heavy at the same time. Gundajim is based off of an army ant, and all of the medals are like really funny and campy. I like that part, but I'm not really getting army from this guy. And that's kind of a hard one, right? Because like I know that the military looks different everywhere, but there's not a ton that's giving military besides the medals, at least from what I can see. So Axe Megas for the win. Match 294, Führer Hell Saturn versus Rita Repulsa. And as we near the end of the video, I'm excited to introduce the Queen of Evil herself with us. Rita Repulsa is an icon, is a classic, and is infamous. I love the touches of the blue with the nice brown color. I think, honestly, there could be more going on. But when you're against a parody of Darth Vader, with strange little proportions all over the place, I am happy to say that Rita Repulsa will be moving on to the next round, even if I want there to be some like bejeweling or stoning or something just to make her look a little more interesting. Match 295, Pukoshin Jackal versus Dr. Ashura. And these two both have designs that are way too simple. But if we're comparing them, which we are, at least Jackal doesn't have that awful hair that Dr. Ashura is sporting for some reason. The orange and the silver on Jackal looks okay, and I like his helmet. I like Ashura's like skeletal look, but it's just not enough, especially when you're supposed to be one of the main villains. Like I said before, Jackal will win in this case. Match 296, Bubuka versus Wandering Boma Kirika. I like the armor on Bubuka, but the lack of a real face and overall the lack of like distinguishing features is a hard barrier for me. I like the bright red on Kirika, and the weapons fit her really well. The little pieces of armor on her top half are like great little details. Kirika is going to wander into the winner's circle. Match 297, Tai Yaji Kolar versus Kyu Kyutan. And honestly, I'm happy to say, because of the way that I'm dressed today, this is a turbo monster that I don't have an issue with. I think he deserves a reward for that. And I guess his reward in this case is going up against this hypothetical tire monster. It's not really giving tire at all, but part of that might be the quality of the photo. Either way, Kyutan is going to be our winner, and I am very happy to say that you have earned it, along with OO Batan, in terms of making sure that the turbo monsters don't all look like garbage. Match 298, Dora Cockatrice versus Maze. And the hard part with Maze is that I only have half the picture, and what I'm seeing isn't super pleasant. I like the white theming, but that hair is just not it. Dora Cockatrice is no supermodel either, but it's pretty campy, so I can give that to it at least. Cockatrice, like, barely sneaks a win by. Match 299, Plasma Brain versus Amazon Killer, and this one comes down to a good use of color for me. Like, I like a black and white outfit, don't get me wrong, I think that's great. There's something about the sheer amount of white that is holding Plasma Brain back in this case. I like that Amazon Killer is using the colors that she has in a balanced way. The pink, the gold, the white, the red, and the black are all present, but none are overpowering. They're all kind of in nice balance with each other. Amazon Killer gets the win for me. Match 300, Dora Endos versus Kibisha Desu. And I like the non-traditional design of Endos and the use of color although I wish it had a bit more structure to the like hanging tentacles. I don't love that they're just like floppy sitting there. Um, Kibishidesu has some interesting elements like the pencil gun and like the chalk ammo on his chest, but the little things like the feet and the general like face area are going to be misses for me, unfortunately. I think for the season that he's from, it's weird for them to miss as hard as they did with him. Um, Endos wins, but not by much. And that is the end of our third part of the Super Sentai tournament. I feel like in this video we had a lot more landslides than we normally do, which is kind of exciting because that also means that some really good designs are being shown off rather than just some that are like both kind of mid. I do want to thank everyone for sticking around and watching the third part of this video. We are slowly cranking our way through round one, and because one of my videos has officially cracked over 50 views, I feel like I need to do that cringy YouTube thing where I say, make sure to like and subscribe and all of that stuff so you can get in early on what is certain to be the next huge YouTube trend, which is bracket breakdown. Either way, I am excited to continue this this trend with you guys, and I will see you all in the next one.